What if surviving minus 50 degrees had nothing to do with strength? At that temperature, metal doesn't bend. It fractures like glass. Diesel fuel thickens into useless gel. Exposed skin begins to freeze in under 2 minutes, and unprotected breathing starts damaging lung tissue almost immediately. Even today, modern expeditions treat these conditions as extreme risk environments, requiring specialized gear and years of preparation. And yet, more than 30,000 years ago, humans were already living there, not passing through, not surviving by accident. Living deliberately, season after season, in the deep Arctic, where winter darkness lasts for months and temperatures regularly approached this very threshold. Archaeological evidence from the Yana River site in Arctic Siberia places humans at nearly 71 degrees north latitude around 32,000 years ago, far above the Arctic Circle. A frozen world with no synthetic insulation, no metal tools, no weather forecasts, and no rescue option if something went wrong. What they had instead was something far more powerful than any single invention. A complete survival system, precise, adaptive, and almost entirely invisible to us today. This is the story of how they built it. Extreme cold does not kill suddenly. It kills through imbalance. The human body constantly generates heat through metabolism. Survival depends on maintaining equilibrium between heat production and heat loss. At minus 50 degrees, the environment pulls thermal energy away from your body roughly 5 times faster than in a temperate climate. It is not dramatic. It is relentless. Ice Age humans solved this first through food. Stable isotope analysis of remains from sites like Kostenki in Russia and Dolny Viestonice in Central Europe reveals diets dominated by large herbivores: mammoth, reindeer, steppe bison. But these animals were not hunted simply for meat. They were hunted for fat. Fat delivers 9 calories per gram. Protein delivers 4. In extreme cold, that gap becomes a survival margin. Arctic studies show cold-adapted hunter-gatherers derived between 50 and 70% of calories from fat alone. Without it, even successful hunters could develop protein poisoning and starve on a full stomach. This explains why Paleolithic kill sites show deliberate, systematic marrow extraction, long bones broken strategically, hammerstones worn from repeated impact, all designed to reach the calorie-dense fuel locked inside. In an Ice Age winter, fat was not a luxury. It was how your body stayed alive through the night. Food generates heat. Clothing keeps it. The oldest known eyed needles appear in Siberia and Eurasia roughly 40,000 years ago, small, refined, and showing microscopic polish from repeated use against hide. These were not crude tools for draping animal skins over a shoulder. They were precision instruments for constructing fitted garments. And that distinction matters enormously. Loose coverings allow convection. Warm air escapes upward and cold air rushes in to replace it. Tailored clothing traps layers of still air close to the body, and still air is one of the most effective insulators in nature. Experimental archaeology projects recreating reindeer hide garments have measured insulation values comparable to modern cold weather gear when properly layered. Reindeer fur works because the individual hair fibers are hollow. That structure traps air and dramatically reduces thermal conductivity. Indigenous Arctic peoples continued using reindeer hide into modern times for exactly this reason. The material was not tradition. It was the correct engineering solution. Footwear carried equal sophistication. Evidence from cold climate sites suggests plant fiber insulation packed inside boots. Grass and moss could absorb moisture from sweat and be replaced when saturated. Keeping feet dry was not comfort. It was survival. Wet insulation fails almost immediately in extreme cold. Nothing about this clothing was primitive. It was thermodynamic engineering built from the only materials the environment provided. If clothing was personal survival technology, shelter was environmental engineering. One of the most striking examples comes from mammoth bone dwellings discovered in present-day Ukraine, particularly at the site of Mezirich. These were not improvised lean-tos. They were circular structures built from hundreds of carefully arranged mammoth bones forming load-bearing frameworks. Animal skins covered the exterior while compacted sediment and snow provided an additional insulation layer around the outside. But the real sophistication was not in the materials, it was in the design logic. Sleeping areas appear elevated or separated from entrance zones. Cold air is denser than warm air. It sinks and pools at the lowest points of any enclosed space. By positioning entrances lower than living areas, these structures created natural cold traps that passively pushed warmer air toward the occupants. No mechanical system required, just an understanding of how air behaves. This same principle appears thousands of years later in Inuit winter house design and in modern polar research stations. That is not coincidence. That is convergent engineering, reaching the same correct answer across time. Some sites also show repeated rebuilding in identical locations across generations, suggesting accumulated knowledge of local wind patterns and solar exposure was being actively preserved and transmitted. They were not simply building shelters. They were constructing controlled microclimates inside one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Movement in extreme cold is not simply physical effort. It is a thermal calculation. The human body operates within a dangerously narrow window. Too little movement and heat production falls below what the body needs to stay alive. Too much movement and the body sweats. In -50-degree conditions, sweat is not discomfort. It is a death mechanism. Moisture destroys insulation almost instantly, and a person can go from adequately protected to critically exposed in a matter of minutes. Ethnographic studies of recent Arctic hunter-gatherers suggest Ice Age people understood this with precision. Slow, deliberate travel, frequent clothing adjustments, careful pacing designed to maintain warmth without triggering the sweat response that could unravel everything. Some Paleolithic transport evidence points toward early sled use for exactly this reason. Dragging loads across snow rather than carrying them reduces metabolic output and keeps sweat production low. Bone wear patterns at certain Arctic sites suggest repeated friction consistent with drag transport across frozen terrain. Animal behavior also shaped how people moved through the landscape. Reindeer migration corridors naturally follow routes, offering wind protection and access to water hidden beneath snow. Following these same paths reduced uncertainty and conserved energy that was nearly impossible to replace once lost. Humans were not only hunting these animals, they were learning from them, reading the frozen landscape through the instincts of creatures that had mastered it long before we arrived. Perhaps the most powerful Ice Age survival technology left almost no archaeological trace whatsoever. Not stone tools, not bone structures, not tailored clothing, information. Knowledge transmission may have determined which groups survived entire winters and which ones simply vanished. Oral traditions likely encoded critical environmental memory passed directly from one generation to the next. Dangerous ice zones, reliable hunting valleys, seasonal wind patterns, the exact location of water beneath frozen ground. Anthropologists studying traditional Arctic cultures consistently find geographic knowledge embedded inside stories rather than diagrams. Landscapes memorized through narrative, hazards encoded in myth, survival routes preserved in songs that children learned before they were old enough to travel them alone. This may explain why Upper Paleolithic sites often show evidence of long-term occupation stability in the same locations across many generations. Knowledge accumulation reduces risk. Familiarity with a specific landscape in extreme conditions is not a comfort. It is a survival asset with measurable value. Mistakes in these environments were rarely survivable. A wrong turn in a whiteout, a misjudged river crossing, an unfamiliar valley with no wind protection. Any single error could end a life or an entire group. Groups that failed to remember disappeared from the record entirely. Groups that transmitted knowledge became our ancestors. Evolution may have favored not only physical adaptation to cold, it may have favored the capacity for cultural memory itself. Extreme cold does not only attack the body, it attacks the mind. Modern polar research consistently shows that prolonged darkness disrupts circadian rhythms, destabilizes hormone regulation, and erodes mood in ways that compound over weeks. Seasonal depression was almost certainly a reality for Ice Age populations enduring months of near-total Arctic darkness. And a psychologically compromised person makes worse decisions. Worse decisions in these conditions meant death. Fire likely served psychological functions as powerful as its thermal ones. A hearth produces stable light in an environment of overwhelming darkness. That light reduces the stress responses associated with prolonged sensory deprivation and helps regulate sleep cycles that darkness alone would destroy. Keeping a fire burning through an Arctic night was not just warmth management, it was mental health infrastructure. Archaeological discoveries of carved beads, animal figurines, and pigment use at cold climate sites point towards something important. These objects required time, effort, and creative intention to produce. Their existence inside survival camps suggests that psychological resilience was considered worth investing in, even when resources were scarce. Morale conserves energy. Despair wastes it in ways the body cannot afford. Social bonding, shared ritual, and symbolic expression were likely not luxuries layered on top of survival. They were load-bearing elements of it. Because the Ice Age did not only demand physical endurance, it demanded reasons to keep going. And the groups that found those reasons outlasted the ones that did not. Temperature alone does not tell the full story. Wind does. At extreme cold, even moderate wind speeds can double heat loss from exposed skin. Modern wind chill models show how -30 degrees combined with sustained wind creates exposure risk approaching -50. The thermometer means very little when the wind is moving. What matters is how fast your body is losing heat, and wind accelerates that process in ways that can overwhelm even well-prepared people within minutes. Ice Age settlement patterns reflect a precise understanding of this reality. Archaeological sites consistently appear behind natural wind barriers. Ridge lines, forest edges, sheltered valley floors. Even small topographic differences of just a few meters reduce wind exposure dramatically, and those reductions translate directly into the margin between a group that survived the season and one that did not. Snow itself became a construction material. Compacted snow traps air pockets that block wind while retaining insulation. Experimental reconstructions show interior snow shelter temperatures holding near freezing even when outside conditions drop far lower. Compared to -50, freezing is warmth. This reflects something fundamental about Ice Age survival thinking. These people did not attempt to overpower winter. They studied it carefully and negotiated with it on its own terms, using natural terrain as defense, turning the environment's own materials against its most dangerous forces. That was not primitive instinct. That was disciplined intelligence operating under the highest pressure imaginable. The human body has weak points. In extreme cold, those weak points become critical failure zones. Fingers lose heat rapidly because of their high surface area relative to their mass. This likely explains evidence suggesting mitten-style hand coverings rather than separated finger gloves. Keeping digits together reduces individual exposure and preserves the shared warmth between them, a simple principle with profound consequences when temperatures drop below survivable thresholds. Face protection appears equally sophisticated. Fur ruffs positioned around the hood opening create a pocket of slightly warmed air around the breathing zone. That small buffer makes inhaled air marginally less damaging to delicate airway tissue. Breathing unfiltered, -50-degree air repeatedly across an entire winter season accumulates real physiological cost, and Ice Age humans appear to have understood this and designed against it. Every element of what they wore likely served multiple functions simultaneously: warmth, moisture regulation, wind deflection, and in some cases, identity and group signaling that carried social survival value of its own. Nothing was decorative in the pure sense. Nothing existed without earning its place in the system. Because in this environment, inefficiency was not inconvenience. Wasted energy meant a body that cooled faster than it could recover, and a body that cooled too far did not warm back up. Every design choice was a response to a specific threat. Every layer, every seam, every carefully packed grass insole represented accumulated knowledge about exactly how the cold tried to kill you and exactly how to stop it. Contrary to popular imagination, extreme environments did not produce more violent societies. They produced more cooperative ones. Archaeological evidence shows injured individuals surviving long after trauma that would have been immediately fatal without sustained care from others. Broken bones healed. Severe injuries recovered. These outcomes require someone choosing to feed and protect a person who cannot yet contribute. That is not instinct. That is a value system operating under survival pressure. Food sharing reduces starvation risk across an entire group. One failed hunt does not devastate one family when resources move collectively. Cooperative hunting reduces individual injury exposure. Shared childcare allows faster physical recovery and greater long-term contribution from every member of the group. Mathematical models of hunter-gatherer survival show cooperation dramatically increases the probability of enduring unstable environments. Isolated individuals in these conditions faced near certain death. Connected groups faced manageable odds. The difference was not physical strength, it was social architecture. Trust became survival infrastructure in the most literal sense. In a landscape where nature offered no forgiveness for weakness, humans built systems of forgiveness for each other. That choice is remarkable, and it may represent the single most powerful survival adaptation in our entire evolutionary history. Cooperation is a technology, and perhaps the oldest one our species ever invented. So, how did humans survive temperatures approaching -50 degrees with nothing but Stone Age technology? Not through a single invention. Through system design, high-fat diets generated internal heat from the inside out. Tailored fitted clothing preserved that heat against the body. Thermally engineered shelters reduced environmental exposure to manageable levels. Controlled, deliberate movement prevented the moisture buildup that destroys insulation. Transmitted knowledge reduced the probability of fatal mistakes. Social cooperation stabilized survival odds across the entire group. Psychological resilience preserved the motivation to keep going when conditions became unbearable. Each advantage alone would eventually fail. Together, they created something the environment could not easily overcome. Modern cold weather survival manuals still teach these exact same principles. Stay dry, stay fed, stay sheltered, stay calm, stay connected. The language is different. The underlying system is identical. The critical difference is that prehistoric humans had no rescue option waiting at the edge of the situation. No emergency extraction, no fallback. Failure did not mean a difficult experience. It meant disappearance from history without a trace. And that pressure may be exactly what produced the precision of their survival knowledge. Because evolution does not reward effort or intention, it rewards outcomes. And the outcomes these people achieved across thousands of winters in the most hostile environment on Earth speak with a clarity that requires no interpretation. They survived, and we are here because they did. So if someone from our modern world suddenly found themselves in an Ice Age winter with only Stone Age technology, what would actually matter most? Not strength, not courage, not even raw intelligence alone. It would come down to whether they understood the invisible systems that prehistoric humans spent thousands of years mastering. Heat balance, energy conservation, shelter physics, social interdependence, the knowledge that no single layer, no single skill, and no single person was ever enough on its own. The real story of Ice Age survival was never about toughness. It was about attention. Attention to wind direction, attention to moisture, attention to terrain, attention to the people beside you. Our ancestors did not survive because they were primitive beings stumbling through a hostile world. They survived because they were precise and disciplined observers of reality operating without a single margin for error. And perhaps the most humbling truth of all is this: they did not survive because they controlled nature. They survived because they understood exactly where their limits were inside it. If this kind of deep exploration of ancient human intelligence is what you come here for, subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows. Because the further we look into the past, the more clearly we see something unexpected. The Ice Age did not just test human survival. It revealed what human intelligence is truly capable of when everything is at stake.